to talk about priorities, and he used a glass jar as an analogy for this, and he put out a table, and he had some things kind of hidden underneath the table, and he had a jar that he put on the table, and he began to ask the class questions about whether the jar was full or not yet. So at first he took out these 5 stones, and he put them in the middle, very carefully in the middle of the jar, and you can see that there's air around the jar, but the stones are there in the middle, and he said, "Is the jar full yet?" And they said, "Well, not yet. It looks like there's room for some more stuff in there." And he goes, "Okay." So he goes and he gets a bucket of pebbles, and he starts to pour the pebbles into there so that the pebbles begin to permeate around all of the rocks that were there, and then the glass begins to be pretty full. The jar looks pretty full. Says, "Is the jar full?" And half the glass, "Oh yeah, now it's full." You can see all the pebbles are in there, and he goes, "Okay, hold on a second." He pulls out some sand, and then he pours the sand in there, right? And he starts to shuffle it around a little bit. The sand starts to settle. More sand in there, more sand in there, more sand in there, until it's filled all the way to the top where you can't get any more sand in it, right? Says, "Okay, is it full now?" And the class like, "Yeah, okay, it's full now." "Wait, hold on a second." He pulls out water, right? Gets the water out, starts to pour the water in, and it's absorbing the water, and it's going in until the water begins to overflow. And then he's like, "Is it full yet?" And they say, "Yeah, okay, it's full." Now, there might be some microscopic stuff or something you can put in there after that, I don't know. But to me, it's pretty full at that point. Would you agree? Now, what if you had that same entire thing of sand and you poured the sand in first, and then you tried to put those big rocks in? Is it going to work? It's just not going to work, right? If you put the water in first, all the water is going to begin to splash out, right? The only way that you're going to get those 5 rocks that he talked about in there is if you put them in first. You got to make those your priority. You got to take care of those things first, and when you do, you could bring the fullness around it in the other way. Apart from that, the analogy is not going to work. So the challenge for us today as we conclude this series is I want to leave you with 5 very important rocks. 5 things that you need to make as your priorities, the things that you need to live out in the area of your finances if you want to excel. If you put your priorities around these things, you will end up with financial peace. So let's take a look at those today. It's going to be the heartbeat of our message. The first stone or the first rock is to determine your priorities. Financial peace has nothing to do with how much you make. It has everything to do with how much you spend. It has everything to do with how much you what? Spend. Okay. So what this is telling us is our priority first needs to be what? It needs to be on God, the creator, the sustainer of the universe. It's him, and all things are created. He is the giver of our resources. He is the one who is the owner of our resources. We are but stewards. So we need to put him first. The first rock needs to be God. And then as we contemplate God and the things of God, the first issue that needs to be a priority is our spending. See, if you can control your spending, you never have to get into debt, right? And maybe I need a disclaimer that I shared with the other classes. The thing that we're attempting to attack here is the consumer debt, the mindset of consumerism. Some of you may be here and you have debt in your life because of a medical condition or something beyond your control. We're not talking about that. Those things are beyond your control. We're talking about the debt that's been created through consumerism. That's the mindset that we need to break. That's the thing that we need to go after and attack and replace that consumer mindset with a godly mindset for our finances. So if we keep God as the foundation and we put him first, the next thing we need to tackle is our spending. Our government doesn't have an income problem right now. The taxes actually would work if we could control our government spending, right? They're spending too much. For every dollar that they bring in, they're spending more than $1. They're spending like $1.50 or something, or maybe $2 for every dollar that's coming in. If you do that in your own life, after a period of time, what will happen? You will go bankrupt, right? You're going to go bankrupt. You're going to have serious financial stress. You cannot live that way all the time. In fact, the creditors ultimately won't let you do that because they know that you're going to not be able to pay them back. But the Bible gives us great cautions about going into debt, which is kind of leading us into part 2 here. Number 2 is decide to get out of debt. If you have debt, that is the leading cause of the stress that you're experiencing for most of us. There's a financial peace class that's been going on in the mornings that took place first service, a lot of wonderful people, but they gave us a statistic that was shocking. They had all the people in the class add up all of their consumer debt, leading out the mortgages from that, but the consumer debt that they had, and there was over $750,000 in debt amongst 20 different families. That means that in those 20 families, you averaged about $50,000 per family in consumer debt. If you take that same statistic, I bet you it probably holds true for many of the other people that are here. Those are families. As a couple, they had $50,000 in debt. Could you imagine how many kingdom resources would be freed up if families weren't in that kind of debt? Could you imagine how much stress could be relieved if we weren't in that kind of debt? So that's why we're offering classes like that, Financial Peace University, or another one that we're starting right after Easter that's a 6-week class called I Was Broken, Now I'm Not. Because some of us, you're broke right now because you got too much debt and you don't know how to tackle it. That class is specifically about managing your finances God's way, getting out of debt so that you can not be broke, so that you can be living in a place of financial peace. That class costs $25 just to cover the resources. It begins the weekend after Easter at 10 o'clock in the morning in the back room. There's a sign-up sheet out there in the lobby. If some of you, if this message is resonating with you, but you don't know the next step, sign up for that class. Get in there, plug in, get the tools in your tool chest that you need to be able to move forward and get out of debt so that you could have freedom in your life. It may seem like an insurmountable task, but I guarantee you that for many of us, it is a spending problem. You're going to need to adjust your lifestyle. You're going to need to adjust your spending. And it may hurt for a season because you're not going to maybe enjoy all the things that you think you're enjoying, but later you're going to have freedom from that bondage of sin and debt. You're going to have freedom in that, and you're going to have a long-term ability to be healthy and have a lifestyle free of that burden on your life. So some of us need to step in there and tackle that issue head on, the issue of debt. Hebrews 13:5 tells us, don't love money. Be satisfied with what you have. For God has said, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you. You know, a great decision that class just made is that many of them took their credit cards and they began to chop them up. And I see that they posted them on Facebook too, man. They're like, I'm posting it on Facebook and I'm cutting it up, and they chopped it up and they're excited about it. And some of us need to just cut it up. I mean, just cut it up so that we can not go back into using those as a means of growing our debt, that we would begin to live within our means. They've also started paying down their debt. They've got a little thermometer meter in there where families are saying, I'm taking what this debt was and I'm going to start paying into it because I need to get it down, because I know that when I do, I'll have some financial health in my life. Let me talk to you about the 80-10-10 rule. It's been a foundation of what Mary Jo and I have tried to live out in our lives. We use a variant of it for the life of the church. It's pretty practical. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. The first 10% of your income on the gross, not the net, right? The gross income. The government don't take off your net, do they, right? The government takes off your gross, but God wants the first fruit of all of our increase. That means of our income. So 10% right off the top needs to go to God. The government was very wise. They started to take the money out of your paycheck before you ever got it so you don't feel it, so that you live like you're on the net all the time. That's what Mary Jo and I have done in our own life. Automatically, we've automated our giving, that the first time money comes in, the first thing that we write immediately goes to God. We don't count it as income. We don't count it as money that's usable, so that we never get into that thing of, oh man, maybe if I take this to go do it over there. That's never a discussion in our life and in our family. We always put that first. It's the first fruit of our increase. It's the first thing that goes to God. The second thing, if you can start this as a young person and do it your whole life, 10% to savings. 10% to God, 10% to savings. If you put aside that savings for your entire life, when it comes time to retire, praise be to God. I've heard stories of people that earn $30,000 a year or less, but they lived within their means. They controlled their spending. They controlled their savings using this method. And when they retired as millionaires. Literally, it doesn't matter how much you make, it matters how much you spend. And if you're willing to save, God will do extraordinary things with your finances. The rest of it is to live off the 80%. We got to live within our means. We got to live in that 80% zone. Whatever's left over is what we should be living on. John Wesley wrote, make as much as you can, save as much as you can, and give as much as you can, right? A good motto to live by. Now, a couple of questions begin to arise because there's some issues there. Two major ones are, many people would say, I can't give to God because I'm spending too much, right? And then there comes a lifestyle adjustment that may need to happen. On the other hand, there's a whole other group of people that I can't give to God because I'm too much in debt because of my previous bad decisions. which is also a problem where there's a lifestyle adjustment required to be able to get into a level of obedience with God. So how do we address those two issues? Well, one of them, if you owe debt, should you not tithe? What do you think? Should you not give? I, for one, want to be blessed. If blessing comes with obedience, if Malachi chapter 3, verse 9 is correct, and the verses surrounding it, it says, how do I rob God? By not giving him your tithes and offerings. Your finances are under a curse because you're not putting God first, is what that verse says. And we've talked about many other verses to substantiate the same thought processes. So the first money that you got to get, whether you're in debt or not, is you got to give to God. You got to tithe because you got to position yourself at a place of blessing, because if you don't and you remain under a curse, then how are you ever going to get out of debt? Right? So always keep God first. Always put him first in the area of your resources. Now, that means a couple things. Here's where the lifestyle adjustment might come in, because you've got to get out of debt. So, right, if you give God 10%, you save 10%, now you got 10% that you're going to save, or you got 10% that you might need to use for getting out of debt. So here's a question for you. If you have 10% that you were going to put into savings, does anybody know, like, if you had 10 grand in the bank last year and you put it in a checking account, like how much money you would have made by the end of the year? About this much. I mean, maybe a few more now. You might have made like $10 because the interest rates are so low. Now, if you have $10,000 sitting on a credit card at 18% interest and you don't make any payments on it, do you know how much you'd owe at the end of the year? $11,800, right? So would it be better if you were going to pay down money to pay down your credit card or put money into savings? Probably put money into saving, not into savings, into your credit and your debt. You got to pay it off because that money's growing and you're losing money faster than you're making money outside of maybe an emergency fund. This is where the class will get into the very technical details of that kind of a thing. But in essence, the exception to that would be, say you work for an employer, they have a 401k, and they might match your money. For every dollar that you put in, they give you $1. That's a 2-for-1 deal. Go after that deal, right? You want to go after 2-for-1 is good, right? 100% return on your money. Every dollar you put in. So if you have a 401k, I would encourage you to save if you can, but you need to tackle that debt. So one way to begin to tackle it is, instead of saving, you shift that savings towards your actual debt load. The other way is you got to cut back on a few things. That means you might need to get rid of that data plan on your cell phone, or you might need to cut the cable, or you might need to do a few things that reduce the amount of expenses that you have so that you could redirect that money towards paying down the debt. Because once you get the debt paid down, praise be to God, you're going to have financial peace in your life. So you might not get to enjoy HBO. You shouldn't be watching it anyways. All the shows on there are bad, I'm telling you. They're not good, right? So you could cut the cord on a few of those things for a little while so that you could control your spending and redirect those things towards paying down your debt. I'll share with you, as part of Stone 3, what Mary Jo and I did recently. It says, be disciplined in small things is the third stone. Luke 16:10, if you're faithful in little things, you'll be faithful in the large ones. But if you're dishonest in the little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. And if you're untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? If you're not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? No one can serve two masters, for you will hate the one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So God's telling us we need to address these issues head on. So a couple of simple things. If God meets us where we're at, if he wants to help us, if we take these steps and he meets us and he encourages us, what are some of the things that we could do? Many years, Mary Jo and I had done good with our finances, and we probably got a little bit lazy from time to time and let some expenses go unchecked where the money was just kind of flowing out and we didn't think all that much of it. And at the end of last year, we said, man, we need to really look at all of our recurring monthly expenses and say, is there opportunities to save some money on those so that it would free us up to be more generous, right? So we said, let's start to look at a few of these areas of our life. So one of the areas that we looked at when we reviewed our budget from the previous year was we eat out all the time. We eat out more than we eat at home, and it is not cheap to eat out. And it's not good for your waistline either, right? So my trainer was very happy when we decided to not go eat out quite as much, but one of the decisions that we had to make was we cannot eat out quite as much because it's very expensive to go eat out all the time. So we need to eat at home more than eating out. That was a decision we needed to make. I looked at how much money I had spent on Starbucks. and I was completely shocked and astonished. No Starbucks fans in here? Do I got any Starbucks fans in here? All right, a few. First service was full of Starbucks fans.